Hello and welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am very excited for another episode this week. Got a couple more before the August break. Actually, because of the fact that these things are so organic, these conversations I have, sometimes I have a question or two written down or some specific points that I want to make sure that we address or talk about. That usually involves, current projects, sometimes things in the future or specific questions I have about things that my guests have done in the past. But with most of them, that's really all it is just like a couple of notes about, we got to remember to talk about this, this, and this, because sometimes the conversations just go where they go. And I forget to bring up those points. So apart from that, I don't have a list of questions. I don't usually have much of an agenda. Most of the people are people that I know fairly well. And so the conversations tend to just become really natural, organic conversations. And I knew that there was a lot I wanted to talk to my guest this week, Kirlin, about, but we just went into a whole rabbit hole of humanity, and the podcast ended up being about 2 hours. So I have decided to break this into 2 episodes, which will then bleed into August, where I was going to take all of August off. So now I'll just extend that time off into the first week of September. And hopefully it will be something that you guys will enjoy the conversation. The first episode, this one, we really talk about more of her artistic side. And then in the second part, we get a little in depth into our views on what's wrong with the world and what we need to do to make it better and how everyone can help. It's actually, it was a really fun conversation. And I've known Carla for a number of years, and she's just one of those little spots of sunshine in my life. And we've seen each other through a lot of things, and definitely one of the people I know I can always count on. And I was very grateful to get some time to spend with her, and very grateful that she was able to extend the time as the conversation had developed. So, but before I bring this episode to you, just a couple of things going on. It is currently July the 23rd. It'll be the 24th when this comes out. And I am revamping my website. It's almost done. I don't know exactly when the switchover will happen, but it will be slightly under construction for a little while. Incidentally, of all the things that I have not been able to get to work, the Podbean link for the website or for the podcast is the one thing that doesn't seem to be gelling well with WordPress. And I've downloaded instructions of how to get it to work with WordPress, and that doesn't seem to be working quite yet. So still working on that. So in the meantime, what I've done is I've replaced that with all the links of where you can find the podcast, the YouTube channel, on Podbean itself, iTunes, and it's also on Spotify and Google Play. So those links are there, so feel free to check it out there. And also we'll be transitioning the email over to this host, so my email may be down for a little bit. In the meantime, the best place to get a hold of me would probably be the Facebook page for the HaskinCast Podcast, which is in the show notes. I think you can also reach out to me on Podbean. I'm not sure how that works because I've not spent a lot of time with it, but I think you can do like messages for the shows, or like reviews or notes for the shows. On iTunes, it's really more of a global thing. You're really leaving comments for the show on the whole, as opposed to an individual episode, unless you note that episode in your note. Google Play, I'm not sure about. And of course, YouTube is comments per episode. The YouTube one is always later because it has to integrate the graphic. So it's actually a video file, even though there's no video per se. It's just a still shot of the logo and the title of the show. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions, comments, suggestions. If you're interested in being a guest or know someone who you think would be a good guest on the show, that sort of thing, feel free to reach out. Also, for the love of God, please rate the show, put in a star rating, put in a comment, a review. It doesn't have to be anything lengthy. Just, put whether you like it, you don't like it. If you have any concerns about the show, please feel free to reach out to me through those outlets and let me know. And so there's going to be this episode, and then next week I have another guest, and then I think I'll do this second part the week after that, and then that will go into the break. And during that break, I'll be working on finishing up this year's Haunted Holidays album, the third and final in the series. I say final But when you're an artist, anything can come to you at any time. I have a slight idea for a fourth album that I could do in the series. It wouldn't be Christmas. It would be kind of a conglomeration of other holidays. But whether I ever get inspired to write that, we'll see. It's so easy with Christmas songs because you know them so well. And I found some really interesting twists that I thought would be enjoyable to do with these songs, which was kind of the premise of me doing it in the first place. And for the other holidays, I have some ideas, but really nothing concrete. So this may or may not be the final one. It'll probably be the final Christmas one. At the very least. So that will be out sometime in October. Of course, I'll keep you apprised of that. And then let's see what else is going on. Saturday, I've got a really cool concert I'm going to. If you get a chance to see this, it should be amazing. It is Yes and John from Blue Oyster Cult and Asia and the Carl Palmer, Emerson, Lake and Palmer Experience. And I believe listed at some venues, Arthur Brown will be making an appearance. And of course, Carl Palmer was one of the drummers on The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. I'm not sure even which songs. It's an interesting story as I heard him tell it. They had a bunch of different session drummers come in to record various songs, and no one knows whose take was used for what song. It seems like you would kind of have an idea of what you played or what you would have played or what would be your style when you heard it. You'd think you'd be able to identify yourself. But sometimes those sessions came and went so fast and it was, maybe one take and you really don't remember what you played. So kind of interesting that that you wouldn't know what songs you've been credited on. And then, of course, no one was keeping good track of who was playing on what take. So there's really no concrete documentation on it. At least that's the last that I heard on it. But either way, it would be great to see him come out. I imagine they'll probably do Fire. It would be really neat if they did something other than that, like the Great Spontaneous Apple Creation or something. But just to get to see Arthur Brown, I think would be fun. I much like Edgar Winter, he's one of those artists that I just kind of grew up knowing who they were, and they had some special place in my heart, but never would have been anyone I would have thought I would see live. And Edgar Winter was phenomenal. I'm sure that Arthur Brown will be absolutely fantastic too. So that should be fun. And I think that's about it. We'll see what happens with the website. That should be up soon, but all the product links and everything are ready to go. Most of the pages are ready to go. It's just some extra stuff I'm deciding on. And then obviously fixing that Podbean issue. But apart from that, things are trucking, moving forward. And I hope you guys enjoy my chat with my dear and incredibly talented friend, Carla Kirlin. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the show one of my dearest friends, Carla Kirlin. Kirlin, I see, and I just said it wrong after I said I wasn't going to do that. That's how it goes. Carla, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to talk to you. See, you just planted that seed in your head and it just rolled right out.
That's right. I was so convinced that I wasn't going to screw it up that I focused on screwing it up, and then I screwed it up.
Right? It's so how the mind works, right?
It really is. It is. Well, I want to thank you for taking some time to come on the show and to spend a few minutes away from all the beautiful artwork that you create that we're going to talk about. You're always doing something.
I am always doing something, which is really contrary to being a human being because, it's human being, but I seem to be a human doing. So yes. I'm always doing something.
I would agree. And every, I don't get to visit you guys often there in Sedona, which is such even just graphically, the visuals out your windows. I mean, in any direction, it's such an inspirational place to be.
It truly is.
Do you ever find it difficult to be inspired to work? I don't mean having the energy to work. I mean, just being inspired to create something.
Oh, sure.
Really?
I know it sounds impossible, especially living in Sedona, because you're right. I mean, every place I look out my windows, it's just gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And I'm blessed to see some of the most amazing rock formations, which of course I adore, blended in with, amazing cloud formations and greenery. And it's really a striking place if you've not been here before. But anyway, even then, just as with any creative person, we go through phases, and you look outside some days and it's like, yeah, it's gorgeous. I know I should be having a pencil or a brush in my hand right now, or taking at least a picture as a minimum. Mm-hmm. But some days it's just not there. And I've learned, unfortunately or fortunately over time, that that's just kind of part of the cycle. Sometimes as creatives, we just don't have it right there in that moment. And I have an acquaintance that also lives here in Sedona, and she said to me one day, well, sometimes the hardest part is just getting started. Mm-hmm. And I had to really chew on that one for a long time because I knew that she was right as soon as she said it, but I didn't want to admit that she was right as soon as she said it. But it's true. Sometimes that is the hardest part. But yet there are those times when to really be at our best in a creative mode, you have to have time off. And so I think sometimes that's just how it works. You just don't have that inspiration because for whatever reason you're burnt out probably and just need to have some time to recharge.
I could understand that, but I think that your friend really brings up a good point. And I have to wonder if part of that isn't, there's so many things I want to do, I'm not sure which one to commit to. And then once you start one, now you've committed and that's it. But also the other side of it, which is as soon as I put that first brushstroke down, I'm already locking myself into a box in some way.
Right. Absolutely.
And maybe that wasn't the right way to approach it, but we can so easily overthink that first step that we never take it.
You know me all too well. See, that's not fair. Hey, that's the story of my life. No, you are absolutely right, though. We do have a tendency to overthink things way too much and for way too long. And really, when what we really need to do is just take that first step, and then the next step is kind of shown to us. And if we're going in the wrong direction, hopefully it becomes obvious to us relatively quickly, and then we can change direction before wasting too much time. Right. I've been saying recently how I need to become more of a laser beam in my approach and what I want to do as opposed to like the shotgun approach to life. And what I mean by that is just having my attention and my energy and my supposed focus being in so many different things at so many different times. I can't be effective in anything because I'm just too dispersed. Mm. And yet, as a creative person, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, I kind of think maybe it is, but if I don't have that diversity and different things that I can pop in and out of, I have a tendency to get stuck in a rut, or I get bored, doing the same thing. I just can't imagine doing the same thing all the time and just that being my thing. And yet it's funny, years ago, before I ever moved to Sedona, I was here with some friends, and we were at one of the local places, and this woman came out, and it was one of my friend's birthdays. And so this woman said, hey, it's Sedona. So she said, hey, I want to give your friend a free reading for her birthday. And so she came out and kind of just did some general, information for her. And I was actually real surprised at how accurate she was. And so we all kind of struck up a conversation with her. She liked us all. And so she did a little tidbit for each one of us. And when she got to me, she just sort of chuckled and she said, oh, honey, if you could just focus on one thing, you would be so successful.
Well, that's that, and she definitely pegged you on that. I will say, but I could easily say that of myself, and I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's great to be able to say, okay, this one isn't really going where I want it to. I'm going to jump on something else, and then I'll revisit this when the mood strikes. If you just keep jumping around, you really can never finish anything or really work on it to the depth that you want, because somewhere in the back of your mind is one of your other projects.
Yes. And I find that once I start getting back into a creative mode, that happens for me more and more, because then it seems like once that faucet is open, it doesn't just drip, like everything comes in. And then I do have a tendency to want to do everything all at once. And again, back to the lack of focus on perhaps any one thing, although I have phases, I guess, of time where that's not necessarily the case. Like when I first got to Sedona and I first started working on one of my big canvases, and I was just so excited to finally have the space to be able to do it and be kind of back mentally in that space as well, and just have that opportunity. And that's pretty much what my life was for about 6 to 9 months. That's what I did. Mm-hmm. And it was awesome. So there are those times as well where I didn't care about working on anything else. I was just, on a burn to get this canvas done. I mean, almost to a point where I didn't take care of myself or anything else too. You know, and there is that side of the equation where I can be so engaged in a project that everything else falls away. And that's not a healthy balance either.
No, yeah, that's very true. And I tend to do the same thing. In fact, when I am working on a project, especially one if I'm doing for someone else and it has a deadline to it and it takes a lot of my time, I'll finish the project and I'll look around my apartment. I'll go, oh my God, how did I get so sloppy? I don't live like this.
I know, right?
Anything that's not a necessity just falls to the wayside. But our health is so vital to us not just being able to create, but to be able to create with the effort that we want to put into it. And we have to really find a way to work ourselves into the equation, really more so than anything else.
Right. It's true.
Yeah.
You're so right about that. And, you know, I guess over time we'll get better with it, but, you know.
I hope so. I don't seem to be doing any better than I was at it 10 years ago.
I know, me too. I mean, I feel like we've had this conversation probably at some point in our acquaintance. And so it's like, wow, here we are 10 years, 15 years down the road going, how well are we doing on that? Okay, so we need to revisit that a little more.
Yeah. And I think that my body has kind of struck back a little bit over the last couple of years and said, I'm going to make you deal with me and you're just going to have to do it instead of saying, oh, that little ache is fine. I'll deal with it later and never doing it.
You know, and you're so right about that as well, because I am equally bad about that as you are. And my body has been reminding me over and over about, you can't do this anymore, or you can do that, but you've got to do it in such different quantities than what I used to do them in. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult for me too. You know, I actually in the last few years have had to really relearn how to do certain things. And so that's kind of challenging and frustrating, but you know, I find a way and then you just keep moving on. But yeah, sometimes it's difficult. And like you know, sometimes I'll be working on a deadline and, you know, it's kind of in a way, it's a sick, twisted way in which we live. But I happen to really thrive in that kind of environment. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do it 24/7, you know, and then 365. That's not the kind of thing I'm talking about. But on any given project, I actually like having a deadline because that keeps me focused and motivated, and I like that challenge to myself. And years ago, I used to live in that space so much that I got burnt out. But, you know, now I'm learning to kind of pick and choose. Sometimes I don't get to choose, but I find that I do. I perform better, so to speak, when I have that kind of pressure or deadline upon me. Because otherwise, you know, it's too easy to just keep blowing stuff off. I mean, I've got a ton of projects that I've started, and I'm sure you're the same way, you know, and you just push them aside because there's no one except yourself standing behind you saying, hey, get that done. You should get that done because, you know, like we were just saying, it could be 10 years down the road and, oh, wow, you haven't finished that project yet. What is wrong with you?
Right.
You know,
I think too, though, that there's a little bit, maybe a psychological side to it as well, where if I'm working for somebody else and they've got, you know, a release date, they've set up a marketing initiative, they've got things going, and you know that project is going to get out there to people. And when you're doing something for yourself, and you know, if you plan to put it out, even if you're, you know, gearing up for your own project, you think, well, you know, this, you know, no one's waiting for this. It'll happen when it happens. And there's no sense of urgency. Whereas you have a finite amount of time, and you don't have time to overthink someone else's project because it just has to be done by midnight on that day.
Exactly. And, you know, it really pushes you into that zone of creativity where if you do things that you never realized that you could do, or it forces you into a different creation than what you originally thought. Or, you know, sometimes those particular situations force us to be more creative than we would have otherwise been.
Yeah, I agree. And it's too easy to edit yourself or second guess along the way and make decisions that the art is not telling you to make.
Right.
You know, have you ever gone kind of too far with that where you've made changes and then you look back and go, I really should have just left it in the original state that I had intended?
Oh, yeah. And it's not that the end result was, you know, terrible or whatever, but yes, I've definitely pushed things too far. And especially, you know, I shouldn't say especially, but in the art world, people are always looking for something that's a little different and kind of on the edge. And overall, I can do those things, but I'm I guess what most people would call more of a traditionalist. But there are things that I do that could definitely be more on that cutting edge of abstractness. Mm-hmm. If I just wouldn't push them to the end. But there's like this part of me that says, I've got to see it all the way through. I just want to know what it'll look like.
Right.
And then, like you said, once it's on there, you can't take it off. But a perfect example when you started talking about that was two pieces popped right into my head. One was the one that I just referenced, the first painting that I started working on when I first got to Sedona. And the underneath painting, so to speak, was just this really awesome blue and cyan color. And I really did consider just leaving the whole thing in the blue and cyan. And then I thought, yeah, but it's Sedona, and once the red's on there, it's just really going to pop. And I couldn't resist the temptation. And then once it was on there, I was committed, like you said. But I actually had someone that you know very well who saw the picture in mid-process and said to me, wow, you should have just left it like that because it was so cool, just like it was. I mean, not that they didn't like it, once it was done, and it's still a really stellar piece, but there was just something super cool about that abstract blue, just with that, you can let your mind kind of extrapolate. And then the other piece is a piece that I did for my brother and my sister-in-law, and it's of one of their dogs, and he's just this adorable little puppy, at the time that I did the drawing. And I got about midway through the drawing, maybe a little further, and I thought about stopping because I really loved where it was at. But again, I just had to keep pushing it, it, all the way through to like the sharp contrast, because I really like the contrast of light against dark and everything. And it just wasn't there in my mind yet, and so I just kept working it. And then again, had to finish it all the way through. It's an adorable picture, but overall, artistic-wise, I really like the midway through shot more than I like the completed shot.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing. I mean, if you're songwriting, if you're an author, it's easy to rework things. I mean, yeah, it can be time-consuming, but you can always rework them. Once you've put paint to canvas and it's dried, there's only so much you can do after that fact, right? I mean, you're kind of stuck to an extent with what you've got.
You are, unless you want to cover over the whole thing with a whole new batch of gesso and start just fresh. But, paint, you've got texture, you've got all kinds of considerations.
Yeah.
And, there really is that point of no return sometimes.
Did you ever go back and paint the other picture?
No.
I think I would have been tempted to do it.
I might do it in future work, but once you get one piece done, at least this is for me, like I would not go back and do the same picture again. I might do a variation of it or a cropped in version of it, but it's one of those things where I don't like redoing the same thing over and over, even if it's different.
Yeah.
Now, the exception to that is sometimes with my, computer generated work or something that's smaller, that's easier for me to redo. But, a big piece like that or a drawing that takes so long, I'd rather do a new drawing of the dog in the style that it, you know what I mean? Or do a new painting of the same scene perhaps, but not identical in everything that would be in it.
I can understand that.
But in Sedona, you have all these, famous rocks. And so you can get them from different angles. And that is one thing about being here. I mean, I can look out, for example, my bedroom window, and I see a different view of Cathedral Rock than what is like the known view of Cathedral Rock to most people.
Right.
And so I could have endless potentials of just painting that, for example, in different ways, or coffee pot rock, or Snoopy rock, for example. That's another one where, you can do Snoopy in a lot of different ways. It doesn't seem like it, but you can, you can do it different times of the day with different lighting and, different colors.
Sure.
And of course, when you live in Sedona, you do see all manner of different variations. And so then there's that.
Yeah. And you guys get, people think Arizona, they think dry, hot desert, but Sedona, actually, you guys get a good amount of snow and a good amount of cloud cover. And so when the sun is peeking through the clouds, or, there's just a little bit of different atmosphere from the clouds and the lighting. I mean, every moment could be something that looks a little bit different or gives you a little bit of a different perspective on the scene that you see every day. Yeah. We don't get that so much here in Vegas. I mean, we get the cloud cover from time to time, but we get more wind than anything else. So it's mostly days of clear blue sky, which I would have never thought would get annoying until I moved to Arizona. And I'm like, will you just give me one damn cloud? Just something.
Right. Just a little puffy one somewhere.
Right. Well, now, when you talk about your canvas, though, and you say a large canvas, but we're not talking about anything. I mean, we're talking about a very large scale canvas. So what is the size of those pictures that you use? Because I don't know the dimensions.
Oh, well, the one that I was just talking about, it's a 40 inches by 60 inches. So that's, it's pretty big.
That's sizable. That's weeks of work.
Yeah, it was months of work.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I've done that's large, at that, large is 36 by 48. So although not quite as large, it's still big. And, they're so fun to do, but I am such a detail-oriented person that it takes me a long time. I'm not a slap it on the canvas really fast, abstract kind of painter.
Right.
And not that there's anything wrong with people that do that. I've seen some amazing abstract work, especially of Sedona and the rocks, because, texturally it just kind of lends to that kind of work anyway. But, just everybody's got their style. And I really love focusing on details and things. And so they do take me a long time. In fact, I had them on display at a place down in the village, Boat Creek, for a while. And we were having what they call, a art walk on a Saturday. So people were in and out, and other people were displaying their artwork. And there was a guy there, he was kind of staring at it, and he did wood sculptures and stuff. He was looking at it, and he was under the impression that it was a giclée or a canvas wrap, like they're so popular right now. And then somebody had made a comment about it being an oil painting. And he looked at me and he said, "You mean you painted that with a paintbrush?"
No, I used the cat.
I said, "Yeah, actually I did." So, it was just one of those moments that was classic, because people just don't realize sometimes, the level of work. And he thought it was a photograph that I had just done a canvas wrap on. So I said, no, it's actually a painting. So there are those moments that are kind of fun.
But that's a pretty big compliment, really, for him to think that it was so detailed and so clean that must have been a photograph printed onto a canvas.
Well, there are times when I think it is a blessing, because I just love being able to reproduce it at that level. That's my thing.
Yeah.
And I'm that way with a lot of my work. But then sometimes I wonder, well, is that really the best? Because number one, it's supposed to be artsy, and it seems like most people, if they were going to go for that, maybe they'd just rather have the photograph and save themselves some money or something. I don't know, but I've never had anybody look at them and go, "Yeah, you should, just find a different line of work." So that's good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting that you say what it's supposed to be, because what really defines that? I mean, as artists, do we define that? Do we come up with the idea, and then the direction it takes defines that?
Well, the old saying, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really kind of irrelevant as far as, I don't know, you just have to do what you do and you put it out there. And this, being a musician and a creator, you do what you do because that's the gift that was given to you, because you got to be who you are, because everybody else is taken. And if you spend your whole life trying to be somebody else, then you waste your whole life. So then you just do what you do and hope that other people love it or like it or want it,
Right. Yeah, very true. And I think if you're staying true to yourself and being honest with your own work, not trying to make it commercial or not trying to be something that just doesn't suit you, I think it tends to be more received than if you're geared up to be something like a commercial success. I think people feel the energy of it.
I hope so, because I do what I love, and sometimes, it has a little more abstract feel to it, or so realistic, I guess, is one of the descriptors that I've heard about my work, because although it's based in realism, it does have a bit of a surrealistic quality to it at times.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of fun. But yeah, you just have to stay true to what you do. And I don't know, it changes over time as well, and that's one of the fun things as well. And you've probably experienced this as a musician and a creator, that there's a certain style that we might maintain throughout our entire lives, but we go through phases just like anybody else with, sometimes I work on cards, sometimes I work on paintings, sometimes I work on music, sometimes, I work on three-dimensional art, or, sometimes I work on people's bathrooms, and paint their walls. I mean, literally, I love painting, and sometimes it's as generic as that, where I'll go in and just paint and do that because I just love that kind of, not as involved, to get it done faster, but I'm still painting and creating something cool and doing something that's beneficial for someone else,
Sure.
Because that's always a part of the equation that I want to put into everything that I do. I kind of at this point in my life where it's like, I don't want to create just for the sake of creating, because then you just end up with a bunch of stuff that maybe you love, but you might not have a place, to display it or sell it. And I kind of want to, again, back to the laser beam approach, be more effective with my time and really effective with the work that I do, so that I can connect with the people who really love what I do and want what it is that I have to offer, instead of wasting time, spinning my wheels, like we were talking about earlier.
Right. Yeah.
You can get into those cycles where you just spin your wheels out of control. And, next thing you know, you're still on the hamster wheel. And nothing's really happened.
Yeah. Are you, now you do work in oils. Why did you choose oils over, say, acrylics?
Funny you should ask. No, actually, I like the flexibility of oil, because I do like to take my time. And one of the things about my work, whether I'm drawing or painting, I won't say I'm obsessed with nuancing, but I really love smooth transitions. It's just my thing. I love working from light to dark and just having a smooth transition. And so oil paints allow for me to be able to work and rework areas sometimes, whereas acrylics really dry in a hurry. So you have to be fast with them.
That's true.
Now, I do have some smaller pieces that I do. They're really different. They're textured pieces on linter paper, and I do those with acrylic paint because they're smaller, number one, so I can work more quickly.
Right.
And I can blend things when they're smaller like that. And I almost have it to a point where I can't really say it's so watered down when I use the paint that it's like a watercolor, but kind of. And then I can just build up. If I need more color on it, I can go back and rework it if necessary. So I enjoy that. And I do really love watercolor. I just can't say that it's my strongest medium, but it's something that I love working in. And I'm working actually on a new style of that for me. So that's kind of fun.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Yeah.
When I was a kid and I used to paint, and I was never any good at it. I started with oil, and then I realized that it didn't dry fast enough for me, and I would inadvertently screw up everything that I did while trying to do other things. So I had switched to acrylic for that very reason, because it does dry faster. But I would sit there on Saturday morning or whatever day, and I would, have my canvas and my palette and my fan brush and everything. And I'm watching Bob Ross, and he's painting this beautiful, lake in the woods with a cabin. And I'm like, here's a cloud with two birds in it and really out of place looking lightning bolts. And, but he would always do this thing where I'm like, oh my God, this is such a beautiful painting. And then he would say every time the magic phrase, something like, let's just put a little water wheel in here. No, Bob, don't, and I'm sitting there just
don't do it,
begging him. Of course he can hear me. And he would put it in. And as soon as he started, I would be like, you ruined this painting. This is ugly now. And then he would just turn it into even more magic.
Isn't that amazing? I know.
It is. But for you, when you're working on something, when is the point where you decide it's finished? That you don't want to put another leaf on a tree or another shrub somewhere? Like, when do you go, it's complete?
You know, there's no magic formula for that. You just know.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have to just draw a line somewhere. Like, you know, sometimes when, for example, on the really big paintings, I could tweak on them forever.
Mm-hmm.
Really. You know, I could go in and just keep working the depth and adding more detail or, well, not really, but, you know, I could work them further, but you just get to a point where you look at a piece and you go, yep, that's it. It's done. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's a painting or a drawing or whatever the thing is that I'm working on. I find that to be the case.
Yeah. Now, when you get into more of the drawing side of your artwork, you really tend to stick towards animals as your main thing, isn't it? Cats and dogs?
Yeah, I love little fuzzy faces. I'm a sucker for animals. What can I say? You know, nature in general. You know, that's why I love doing paintings of landscapes and florals and just all kinds of things like that. But yeah, animals just have such a soft spot in my heart. And when we still lived in Phoenix, we had gone through a year of great loss as far as our pets. And it was kind of just one of those things where they were kind of all the same age. And we had cats and birds and an iguana. And just like, yeah, we just took a huge hit. And I kind of stepped back from that and went, wow, I just don't even know how to recover from that. And we ended up at that point with just two cats. And then one of those cats passed, and I was like, oh man, this is not good. And so we ended up moving as well. And as fate would have it, we were renting the house at the time. And one day there was a cat that just sort of showed up in our back shed, and she had little babies. And this was during the time when the housing market was just taking a tank. You know, the whole economy was crashing, you know. And so people were bailing out of the neighborhoods right and left. And the homeless animal, you know, basically crisis in Phoenix was just like the homeless people crisis. It was out of control. And so here was this poor little mama. She was just as skinny as a rail. And I don't know how long it had been, you know, since she'd been cared for. And so anyway, you know, my husband says to me, okay, she could stay in the shed, but you know you can't feed the cats, right? I'm like, yeah, I know. Once they get old enough, we're going to, you know, capture them and put them into the adoption process and all of that. Well, it didn't really play out that way. And by the time we realized it and got kind of hooked up with the people that work in that field, I mean, that really know how to hook you up with the right people to do adoption and, you know, or at least as a minimum, get them someplace where if they're too old to adopt, it would be a no-kill, you know, shelter or whatever the thing. And so that was really the beginning of our journey into the pet rescue world and just how involved that is and how many people care about it and just how big the need is for that. And so anyway, Mama Kitty ended up having another round of kittens. And wow, yeah, we thought that we had them all adopted out, and that changed, and we didn't. And so we had to capture all of them and take them in and have them spayed and neutered. You know, we went through all of that and worked with some just amazing people that donated their time and their talents. I mean, everything from what would be considered like animal social workers to doctors and nurses who donated their time with mobile MASH units for animals, for people who were in these situations where they would just find animals and, you know, you need to get them spayed and neutered so they're not out there creating more new little baby animals.
Right, yeah.
And in my heart, I fell in love with, you know, all of the people doing the work and the plight of all the little animals, as if I needed to fall in love with animals more. But I did. And then I just, at that point in my life, you know, life changes, and the work that I was doing at that time for a photographer just sort of came to an end. And I just sort of rolled into wanting to work more and more with getting back into the art field. And I did that by doing sketches of cats. And I just realized how much I love doing it and capturing just what beautiful lives have been saved, you know? I mean, to be able to look into the faces of some of these babies and just know that the only reason they exist is because good people out there cared enough to, you know, do something about it.
True.
And my desire has always been to somehow take my love and talent in creating the artwork and somehow pairing that with people that work in this field at whatever levels I don't even know yet, and making it a win-win, you know, for all of us, because I've always believed, as you know, that when we all do what we're really good at and work together as a unit or a team, then the potential for success seems to be so much greater. And that's why besides just the regular passion of animals, that's the other side of the equation for me in doing the animal drawings, is that it just brings such joy to the people, and in some way I want it to eventually benefit the bigger picture.
Well, and I think it's easier to find people in unity when it comes to the love of animals, especially dogs and cats, because it can be such a personal experience, just like having a child, that they, you know, the attachment is almost the same. And,
right.
You know, to find artists to work with can often be difficult, but I think to find unity, to have a group of people that work together towards a common goal in that field would be much easier.
Yes. And that's kind of always been my thought process as well, because people are crazy about their animals. And I love that they are. You know, people say, oh, you know, we should be focused on humans, blah, blah. It's like, you know what? There are tons of people out there that are focused on the humans, and I focus on the humans as well in different ways. You know, I do what I can to help humanity in other ways, as you know. And so, you know, I choose to use my artistic talents, visual art talents, in this particular way. I can draw humans. I've drawn humans. And it's not that I'm opposed to doing that. You know, I certainly don't want anybody to feel like, oh, I'd love to have you draw my new grandbaby or my, you know, fill in the blank cousin, or, you know, whatever the situation is. It's always situational with me. When I make that connection with the human or whatever the thing is, that is the ticket. You know, the people that I have drawn in my life, with a couple of exceptions, I did them because of the special love or bond that I had with that person, or the person that connected me to that person.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So There's that. And with the animals, you know, they just have this whole love unto themselves. And I just adore being able to capture just the right expression on their face, where you look at it and you just know, yep, that's so, you know, fill in the blank, Foofy, or whatever the pet's name is, you know?
Yeah, but you have to, I mean, as an artist, you have to divide your time out. And if you're going to divide it out, you want to go with the things that are going to inspire you the most. And,
right.
You know, it's humans may not be your source of inspiration. If it's animals, you know, especially cats and dogs, then that's what you spend your time doing. I mean, I could write polka music, but it doesn't inspire me to want to write music, you know? It's nothing against polka. It's just not my forte. I'd rather be writing, you know, something different. So, yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad that you spend your time pursuing the things that make you smile.
Well, you know, I've always had this thing, too. I was just sitting here thinking about that. Is I've always had a thing for eyes. And when I used to sit in class at college, you know, if my mind would wander and I'd find myself doodling, oftentimes I was doodling eyeballs. And that's one thing that I love about being able to do the pet drawings, is that most of not even most, all of the drawings that I've done so far, at least, they're captivating because the animals are looking at the camera, whether it's a picture that I've taken or a picture that the person has given me of their animal. You know, it's that super engaging moment where the animal just looks as if they are looking right into your very soul, and you're just so in love with them. You know, I love being able to capture that, and that's a special honor for me too. You know, one of the things that I really have a new tender desire for is to work with people who have recently lost their pets. because, like you were saying, so oftentimes they are just a part of the family. I know my pets have always been a part of the family, and I know other people who feel the same way. And especially if they don't have children of their own, it's like their pets become their children.
Right.
And when those pets are gone, I mean, they grieve just as if, and it's really difficult. And people often ask me, what is it that we could do for so-and-so that would be like a keepsake, basically?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of places, you can get the paw prints done, or you can have a special picture taken. And those are all really sweet ideas, and I love all of them. But there's something special when I'm able to do a drawing for someone and they open it up and they see their little beloved pet that has then become like a family keepsake. And there is no exchange for that. You know what I'm saying? Like the emotion of that moment is the payback.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just so incredibly awesome.
And you're really just reaching out and touching someone's heart when you do something like
Right.
that, because they are so passionate about their animals. And I think that's a beautiful
Right.
thing to be able to do. Interestingly, the eyes are one thing that I was never good at drawing. I could draw like one eye really well and the other eye looked like it was diseased. I could just never get them, to look symmetrical or whatever. Like one would be just too small and out of balance for the other one. And So I started just drawing people in profile.
Well,
just
that's
getting
kind
around
of fun
it.
too. But the whole different weird eyeball thing could just be your style. You know what I mean? And you'd probably be famous before me or more successful than me, because people would look at that and go, "Now that's creative."
Well, yeah, like Surratt had his thing of painting everything in dots, and that could be my thing. Is like he could be the cocky-eyed guy.
Exactly. I mean, come on, look at Pablo Picasso. And I love Pablo Picasso, but the dude was out there. You know what I'm saying? Or Salvador Dali. Come on, he's one of my favorites too. But everything was melting, and I love artwork like that. That's just not how my brain works. But I marvel at people that can do things like that, because that's just to me, that's like a whole other level of creation.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, I'm still stuck on Hieronymus Bosch's painting of hell, just trying to understand what he was on when he came up with that. And
oh my God, that's right. Sometimes you have to step back and wonder, but hey.
Exactly. But your art now has extended into some sort of interactive work for people. So tell us a little bit about the cards that you do.
Oh, yeah. Ever since I was young, I have loved making cards, greeting cards. And some of it stems from the fact that they're small, and so I can get them done more quickly, even though they're full of detail at times. It's like I can spend 3 days on it instead of 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years. And so I love that aspect, but also some of it stemmed from, I never knew what to get people that was going to be special or unique. And so I thought, well, maybe a handmade card would be cool. And then quite frankly, there were times and are times in my life where, it's the whole, starving artist scenario, and you just don't straight up have $5 to go to the local fill-in-the-blank drugstore and buy a card for somebody for their birthday or anniversary or whatever.
Right.
And so you get really creative, and a lot of times I would just make cards because of that. But all through it, I've always loved doing it, and I still love doing it. And I have actually quite a few different varieties of cards. And my most recent iteration of the card extravaganza, shall we say, has been the coloring card craze, because, the coloring thing has just been so popular in the last few years. And although I really love all the mandalas and the whole concept of doing it because it's Zen, I also had a lot of people that would tell me it made them nuts, because they got super stressed out trying to make it be perfect or get it balanced or whatever. I mean, those would be people like me that, are kind of anal about their art. But at the same time, I started talking with my neighbor, and she said, well, what do you have in mind? And I said, well, I'd really love to do a line of cards, that people could color and then send to people, because it's such a lost art. Not only people doing the hands-on work themselves, and it's smaller, so it doesn't take as big an investment of time as, say, a full page. And it's actually got an end use instead of just sitting in a book.
Right.
You can actually put it in an envelope and send it to someone. And then I discovered that I actually really loved how they turned out when I did all my samples. And they look so cool just floating on a solid colored mat with a simple frame. They make these beautiful little pieces of artwork that you can do groupings of, or if you've just got, sometimes you'll have just a thin, small wall that you just need a single piece for, or two little pieces you can stack. They're a great size, because they're like, I think the size of cards I do are 4 by 5.5. So they're not huge, but just like everything else I do, they're not just cards, they're art.
Right. Yeah. And they're personal.
They are personal. I've got everything that I have is done for a reason. I don't just randomly do things. Yeah. I have that love for the things that I create. And, it's a whole different avenue of art that there's this side of me that doesn't want that to become a lost art, because, we're so tied in with computers and technology these days that people create amazing things on computers. And sometimes I wonder how much it's the human versus the computer that's doing the creation.
Right.
And I do some of that work myself. I'm not saying I don't use my computer in my work, but I, as a rule, am not a CGI kind of creator.
Yeah.
But there are those who are, and they're amazing. But I don't ever want us to become a society that loses the hands-on, person-to-person, real touch. And cards are one of those things that, when's the last time you got a card in the mail,
It's interesting that you say that, because I actually have 2 friends that regularly send me postcards.
That's so awesome.
Actual postcards. And
Is one of them
that.
Kelly?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. But that does sound like something that she would do. Of course, now that she's back in France now, so
exactly.
It's a little harder. But yeah, just one of them travels quite a bit. So whenever she's out of town and she can, she's in a grocery store or something, she'll grab a postcard and handwrite a message to me on the back. And then my other friend, she kind of moves around from place to place, and she'll send me postcards, again, handwritten. And you're right, though. In general, it is a very lost art. And I feel very blessed to have a couple people in my life that, use that medium. But I was even thinking about what you were saying about cats earlier, and how many people are just so busy looking at cat pictures instead of playing with a cat.
Right.
Giving it actual attention and getting lost in all these, hilarious cat memes. And yeah, they make you smile, but wouldn't it make you smile more to have a cat or play with a cat? Right.
Rub its fur, same with your dog, same with your bird, fill in the blank, pet that you have, because that's what the beauty of them is, that interaction and that just kind of unconditional love that they have for us. And, sometimes I see people with their animals and it just melts my heart because of the connection that they have. Or sometimes even with my own animals, the things that they do and the experiences that we get to have with them are so special. And, it's the same with humans, but yeah, humans, they're a whole new level of dysfunction. So,
well, I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said unconditional love. And this is something I've always felt. You're safe with an animal. You don't have to worry about an animal going out of its way to hurt you for no reason, or being judgmental, or treating you like garbage because you aren't perfect. Whereas an animal doesn't really have an agenda. It appreciates you because you're the giver of the food and cuddles and whatever. But for the most part, they're just going to do whatever they do as animals. And, there's that kind of love is what people really seek in humans. And since they can't have it, no matter how great anybody is as one to love, we all do that. And so with animals, that you don't have anything to worry about, and you can just enjoy each other. And then there's the times where you go to pet the cat and the cat's like, I'm not into you today. And,
There is that. I have what I call a grand kitten who is kind of that way at times. My my son and future daughter-in-law kind of joke about that as well. They say that she's kind of bipolar in that way. And there are times, but overall she's just a sweet, amazing cat, and her little brother is a sweet, amazing cat. And the other thing about that is that the tactile aspects of our animals, our pets, whether it's a fuzzy cat or a fuzzy dog or a guinea pig or a gerbil or a bird, or even iguana. We had an iguana who was amazing. And most people were like, oh, it's an overgrown lizard or a baby dinosaur. And it's like, well, yeah, but you know what? Every animal has its own little personality.
Oh, yeah.
And she was certainly no different. And we used to have chickens when we lived in Phoenix, and each one of them had their own personality. And again, the tactile thing, the touching of the soft little feathers versus the other feathers, or like on baby puppies, where you get the little fuzz on their belly, or, even cats and dogs change from the time they're puppies until they're adults. Sometimes they start off and their little tails and ears are all fuzzy and soft. And then as they get older, it gets a bit more wiry, depending on the dog.
It's almost like the progression of the curiosity versus the experienced.
Yeah.
You're young and curious and trying to understand what the world's all about. And then when you've got that experience, you just you look at it a different way. You present yourself a different way. You have more confidence and stamina, very interesting.
Now, I will say that I have to comment on the agenda thing of the animal, because I have to say that our cat, Handsome Rob, I'm pretty sure his agenda is cheese.
Oh, really? That's okay.
Every time. Well, see, it's a new discovery for him, and thank goodness. But yeah, every time I'm in the kitchen now, he's pretty sure that it's time for cheese. So his agenda is, Mom's in the kitchen, it's time for cheese. Oh. And he's learning to speak in like multi-syllabic sentences, in his request for said cheese. So, don't ever underestimate the power of your animal.
See, and if Pavlov would have understood that, he wouldn't have to ring that bell all the time.
Right? Exactly. Curses the Pavlov.
It sounds like kind of the same type of conditioning.
Right. Oh, it totally is.
Yeah.
I mean, now he understands the opening of the fridge when he hears the drawer and the particular bag that the cheese is in. Oh, yeah, he's all over it.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way when I hear two drumsticks clang together.
Hey, right? It's like, oh, there must be something I can bait on somewhere.
Exactly. Yes. Now, are you getting as much time as you used to do photography? Because you're also really into photography.
Funny you should ask that, because no, actually, to be blunt.
Well, this time of year, it's not inspiring to really go outside when it's 118 degrees outside. You really just don't want to be out there filming anything.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Pardon me. And yeah, you know how life is. You just, you go through phases, and I still love taking photographs. It's one of my favorite mediums, but yeah, life happens and you just get caught up and, pulled in different ways sometimes. And so just like with anything else, there are seasons. Yeah. And I mean, no pun intended. Mm-hmm. This is not the season for me for photography, but I know that there will be a time when, it'll come back around and I'll be super inspired to pick up my camera and go back out and get a whole new bunch of pictures that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with, but they'll be in my folder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's some of it too, though, Scotty, is that I have literally thousands and thousands of pictures that I still have not, done stuff with. And so whether it's going to become a card, a future painting or drawing, or just a photograph, that I'll stick on my website because it's awesome and somebody might want to buy it, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But all of that stuff takes time, as you know.
Yeah.
Go through and find the ones that are really the one, because you can shoot 100 pictures and maybe only end up with 1% that are really worth your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the other thing, that people don't realize is that, whether it's photography or artwork or whatever, there's so much not only prep work, but behind the scenes work that happens before you ever lay a brush to a canvas, or
sure.
for me at least, a pencil to paper or anything like that. So, yeah.
But I know what you mean about the photographs. And of course, in this, we can take, 1,000 pictures in a second world that we live in with our cell phones. I take a lot of pictures of the sky because when we do have clouds, I find them incredibly fascinating.
Yeah.
And, but I'll click a bunch of pictures and then I'm like analyzing every one of them and I'm zooming in like, what's that? This doesn't really look right. And it is a lot of work, even just on the minimal scale of what I do. I can't even imagine the amount of effort that you have to put in for what you do.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. And I can literally spend days sitting in front of my computer editing pictures. And it is something that I love doing. But yeah, days will go by and it's like, oh, wow, I was supposed to eat like 3 days ago and they take a shower.
The cat's not getting any cheese. And
feed the cat, No, they keep me on schedule.
Oh, that's good. But for aromas, we have little resetters, right? Like you can have coffee beans, you can, sniff coffee beans to reset your nasal palate. You can have like a palate cleanser for your tongue. But for our eyes, we really don't have anything that resets us like that. You really just have to be careful of that sort of fatigue. And, if you're going too long, then you could start missing some of the details that you might need to see. It really goes back to that taking care of ourselves thing.
It's true. And also you fall into the trap of if you've been working on it for too long, you have a tendency to, because of the tired factor, not only overlook the little things that you might not overlook, but you get into that zone of, it's good enough. Mm-hmm. And I don't ever want to say, it's good enough.
Right. You want everything to have that quality.
My dad always used to say, he said, my dad always used to say, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right and it's worth doing well. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite memes I have on my desktop on my computer is, and I'm not saying I live up to this in any means, but it's kind of one of those inspiring things where it's like, be so good, they can't ignore you.
I like that. Yeah, I've heard that before. And I think that is a very powerful thing, but it depends on the person, because I think for a lot of people, that could pretty much make them feel a lot of pressure. Just like the same people that, maybe they're coloring one of your cards and they're so stressed about it being perfect. I could see that.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It happens.
It does. But I could also see that as being very therapeutic, though, just sitting there coloring, not a care in the world, just enjoying the process of changing white into color and making something take shape from a visual in your head. I always found it therapeutic when I was younger.
Right, me too. I loved it. And I still do. There's times when I love to just pull out one of my designs and I'll just sit down with pencils or maybe the gel pen and just work on a card because it is relaxing. And I don't, I laughed so hard when you said that because I've actually had people, comment about that where it's like, they'll see something that I've done, a card that I've done. They're like, well, I just don't even know how to compete with that. It's like, it's not a competition. Right. It's about what you get out of it. And, whether you spend 5 minutes on it or 5 hours or 5 days on it, it's like, do you enjoy it? What's the process for you? Is it enjoyable? Because that's the bottom line. I want people to have fun with the cards, especially. I don't want people to feel stressed out. That's not fun.
Right. But I think that the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems that we have as artists, is that we tend to think that we're competing with our other fellow artists. And until we get to the point where we're realizing that the only thing that we're competing with is ourselves, to make sure that we're pushing ourselves to do the best things that we can with our skill sets and growing those skill sets. I can't compete with other people because our backgrounds are different. Our visuals are different. Our experiences have brought us to where we are as individuals. Whether you get a job or you don't get a job over a friend of yours isn't competing. It's, you brought in your skill set, they brought in their skill set, and person picked whoever, resonated with them more. You can't compete with that because you don't know what the person's going to resonate with. But if you go back to that honesty in your art, then I think people will feel that. And if that particular thing that you've created resonates with them in a positive way, then there you go. And if it doesn't, then it wouldn't have anyway, no matter what you did. Right.
That's a very good point and a really good reminder.
It's a tough one, though. I when you're going for jobs, especially when you're putting in for something a bid or whatever, and you know at least one or two other people that are putting in for that same bid, and they're good.
Oh man,
that competition, that natural, and I don't know if women feel that as much as men do. I don't know if that's a testosterone thing, but that really does come into play for a lot of people. And it's taken me a lot of years to really realize that all that matters is that I put out my best stuff. If somebody resonates with it, awesome. If not, then that particular piece just wasn't for them.
Well, and it's great that you're able to look at it and work on it and be better about that. And I know that that's one of the biggest hangups that I have, and why I'm not further along is because I am too detached in that way. Because, people often say to me, why don't you go out and, look at other people's works? You must go to the galleries in Sedona and look at everybody else's work. And I was like, no, I really don't. Because for me, it's almost, it's inspirational. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's inspirational in a rabbit hole kind of way, in that then I want to bounce off and not do, like you were saying, what I'm meant to do, but then try to become more like what that person's doing, because I really admire that person's work or style or fill in the blank, instead of focusing on my own stuff,
Sure.
Not that I can't take that and maybe implement certain things, because let's face it, hardly anybody's, 100% creative on their own anymore. We all are influenced by other people's works and styles and whatnot. But, the other side of that for me too is that I'm sure that you've experienced this. I don't know too many artists or musicians or, creatives who haven't, even business people probably on some level. It's like the creation is like a part of you, the part of your very soul, your very being. At least for me, it is. And so for me to take that and then walk, like cold call basically, into a gallery or a shop and be in that place of, am I worthy to be here? Oh man, that makes me feel like I'm going to throw up. Mm-hmm. I just hate it, So yeah, I can relate to what you're saying as far as whether it's a competition thing or whether it's just, it is a competition thing, because, man, there's just some madly talented people here, everywhere. I'm just constantly amazed at people's talent. But the thing is like we were talking about earlier, you do have to just put out what you do, because you don't know what anybody else might like. Like, there are certain things that I've created that wouldn't be the first thing that I would put out into the public view. But, that friends of mine have seen over time or whatever, that they really like that particular piece. And I'm like, gosh, really? That one? That would not have been the piece that I would have selected for not only you, but pretty much anybody. That's kind of like in my back of the corner stuff or whatever, But you just never know, like you were saying, what's going to resonate with someone.
Well, beauty's in the eye, like you said.
Yeah.
But I have to applaud you. And I remember talking to my friend Amanda Tucker about this on last week's show. It really takes a certain strength for an artist to be willing to show their work to others. And even though people do it all the time, but especially with something that's taken you weeks or months to work on, and you take it into a shop and you say, hey, I wonder if you'd be interested in having this on your wall. That is where there is a little bit of competition, because there's only so much wall space in that store. There's so many artists in a certain area. There is a certain element of that, I would have to admit. But to be willing to even put that painting in your car and drive out of your driveway really takes a certain amount of strength as an artist to do that. And I really applaud anybody who's willing to show off what they've done, because I feel like some of the best stuff in the world will never be seen because people are too afraid to be judged.
Yep, I agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So good for you. Well, I hope that you guys enjoyed listening into our conversation as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. Carla is an absolutely just wonderful, wonderful ray of sunshine in this world, and I'm ever so grateful to have her as a friend. And we'll be back in another couple of weeks with part 2 of the interview, where we really go down the rabbit hole of humanity. Should be interesting, so be interested to see what you guys think about that. And we'll be back next week with another guest. In the meantime, please remember to go ahead and rate the episodes or the show on iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, Spotify, all those good places. And we'll see you guys next week.